Where them Catholics at? Yeah. Yo, where them Catholics at? Man, what's the matter with these bishops?
And welcome back, everybody. It's the Catholic Convert Show. And it's a glorious, I believe, Wednesday afternoon here in Northwest South Carolina. And it's probably just fair to middling over there in Jersey where Ed's at. How you doing today, brother?
I'm doing great. It's always a beautiful day in South Jersey. Just remember that.
Not fair to middling?
Not fair to middling. It's always the perfect day.
Nice. Well, before the show, you and I were going over the aerial shots of where I grew up. Mm-hmm. It's a huge difference from where I live now. Not. It's very much the same. But, I was going through my closet maybe last week, just cleaning out some things because starting to get cooler. Got to start putting the summer clothes up, getting the winter clothes out of storage, and getting them aired out, washed, and rehung up. And I came across this binder, and in there was stuff I haven't thought about in years. And most of it was these huge, thick folders of every little thing my kids brought home from school. This little project that they did in kindergarten or first grade, because we haven't had our kids in public school in 5 years now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a while since hey, look what I made for you at school, Mom, Dad. It's been a while since they've done that because they just do it right there at the kitchen table.
Yeah.
But this is all stuff from when we lived in New Mexico for the most part. Because we were there for about a decade. And I remember I had this idea of what it would be like to live in New Mexico, having never been before. That's where my wife's family's from. And I grew up in the Carolinas.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got out there, I still had this kind of a sense of fear and anxiety. Like, I'm not sure how things are going to go. Obviously, I've never been there. Don't know anybody. Have zero plans for a job out there. We just said, all right, or even a place to live. We moved in with my wife's sister for like 3 months and then got our own place out there because we were looking for a little while, but we just didn't want to stay in South Carolina longer than we had to because she missed her family.
Mm-hmm.
But then we're out there right under 10 years. And then we turn around and we move back here. Now, I made the choice, well, I'm not moving back to the same place we moved from. I'll move to the general area. Like right now, I'm 20 miles from where I grew up. But I don't go back to that place because I overcame my fear of the unknown when I moved out to New Mexico, not knowing anybody, not knowing where anything was. Now, granted, my wife knew people and had family there, but I've always been the one that just provided for my family. So here in South Carolina or even North Carolina, I knew people who knew people who knew people, find work, things like that. But we had gotten this kind of an independent streak going when we were out in New Mexico, because after a little while, my wife's family wasn't there anymore because most of them were either getting ready to retire. They were, older in age, they died, or they were in the military. So they were always moving.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the last 3 or 4 years, we didn't have anyone in New Mexico. But jobs out there sucked, especially at the time, because this is, just a few years after the 2008 recession.
Mm-hmm.
Everything just sucked. And came back out here, found this place that we're living in now, been here 10 years now. But I kind of got addicted to living in places where I had to learn everything about it. Because that's what was weird about this place here. I'm 20 miles from where I grew up, but I'd never been here. Had no idea where anything was here. Don't know. I didn't even know this place existed, right? Because it's a town of like 600, 800 people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like it did anything important and made the news. And so we were thinking of copying that same kind of trend and moving out to West Virginia just a few years ago. The only reason we didn't is because we found our parish and we realized how spoiled we are with that parish. And it would be really hard to replicate. So I'm like, okay, if we move again, we have to move just closer to the parish, or at least not further away from it. Right. So now we have this perfect little circle radius or circumference of where we would live. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And we've gotten very comfortable here.
Yeah.
And the thought of moving away out of state anywhere else is not something we're even going to remotely entertain. And I still get that itch, though. I'm like, I just want to live somewhere and try something new. And part of it comes down to where I'm confident that no matter where we live, I'm going to be fine because my job's not location dependent. As long as I have the internet, I can work. At the same time, I don't want to give up this comfort that we have now.
Sure.
And I was thinking, if I just decided, get rid of this place, move anywhere else in the country or anywhere else in the world, it would be just fine. Because, there's that one verse in that one kind of important book. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called the Bible. People talk about it a lot online every now and then. But no, I mean, it's, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
Sure. It's from Philippians.
Right. And for a long time, I was kind of jealous of people who could say that. And I think I still maybe kind of am. I don't know if I'm jealous of them or I'm annoyed by it. Who can just this brand new thing that they could possibly go and do. Hey, we're going to move to Wyoming or Texas or New York or whatever. Start a brand new adventure. Aren't you worried things might go wrong? I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Anything's possible with God. And they say it with such confidence. And they say it with almost an arrogance, right? But the way my brain works is on one side, I run down this list of almost everything that could go wrong. And I'm like, it's not worth the risk. I'm fine where I'm at. And on the other side, I'm like, screw it, we ball. Just want to jump in with both feet. Yeah. And whatever happens. We're fine. But I wonder, you ever get like that where I want to go try this new thing. I want to go and do this thing that I've never done. And you're capable of completely eradicating any of the fear or doubt simply because of your faith. Because I find myself wrestling back and forth with it. I have 100% faith that something will work out. It might not look exactly the way that I had it in my mind. I might not be able to make a living writing anymore. Something might happen. Maybe I have to go get a job. Whatever. That's fine. But something will shake out in some way where I'm fine and my family's fine. And then the other part is, yeah, but what if it doesn't shake out? Because you've gone through some bad times before. What if it doesn't shake out at all and you're not going to be fine? But I've met so many people, and I've got people who are my friends who are Christians of all different denominations, that they can come out and say that. Not worried about it. God's got me. And they say it with the utmost confidence and arrogance that I'm like, I kind of wish I could do that without having that other side of my brain going, hey, bro, you might want to hook into the safety harness before you tightrope.
Yeah. Well, though, but that's there's so many things that are involved in that question or that line of thinking, because sometimes we'll say that we say, hey, I'm going to take this risk, I'm going to take this chance, I'm going to do this crazy thing because, hey, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Well, but maybe Christ is telling you that's not a good idea right now. You shouldn't try that right now. You shouldn't take that risk right now. So yeah, there's kind of like an asterisk on that. You can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, as long as it's something that he's leading you towards and he is wanting you to do. So because there are people who take ridiculous risks, and maybe they've got a young family, they've got people depending on them, they've got young children that need to be fed and clothed and housed and things like that. And then in that case, I don't think Christ wants you to take a ridiculous risk. I mean, okay, if it's moving to another town because you've got a potential for a better job or whatever, I don't lump that into the category of really huge risks. Yeah, there is risk involved, but it's not to an extreme. So I think it really depends on the situation. Like if you're 25 years old and you're single and nobody's counting on you and you want to take a few years and become a cross-country trucker or something like that, go for it, because you're not really, you know what I'm saying? It might be a worthwhile risk. You can work a lot of hours, make a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. But, I wouldn't suggest that to a 35-year-old guy who's got a 3-year-old and 8-year-old at home, and they're not going to see you for weeks on end. You know what I mean? So I think that you can say that. You can say that it's okay to take risks. You can say that sometimes you have to take a leap, and maybe even a leap of faith. And you can even use the mantra that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But it honestly depends on the situation. And I think that Christ would agree with that he's not saying that you can just you can accomplish anything if you want to, regardless of the situation. I don't think, if I'm going to jump out of a plane without a chute and say, hey, I want to make it because I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, I think Christ might be like tugging you on the shoulder and saying, no, that's probably not a good idea. But you know what I mean? It's just, I think we do have to take some risks in our lives, and we do have to kind of try some different things, and especially if they are going to improve our life or the lives of those we love and those who depend on us. But there are limits to all that sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I got on this line of thinking simply because of I think, I can't remember exactly how many times it's been said. It's a lot, but it's probably the most repeated line in the Bible, which is do not be afraid or do not fear. Right?
Yeah.
And, obviously humans are wired for survival. And a big part of surviving is knowing when and what to be afraid of. And it can sometimes get to where it almost seems foolish to not be afraid of things you should be afraid of, right? Because to me, it starts to feel like some of those Bible absolutists, the sola scriptura, right? If it's not in the Bible, it doesn't exist. Guess what, Australia? You're not real. Same goes for you, Canada.
Yeah, right.
But obviously it comes with a level of discernment. I was terrified of whether or not I was going to be a good dad when I was having my first kid. Luckily, I discovered that I am a bad dad right after I had my first kid. And now I'm no longer afraid of it. I just live within that reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not that greatest of a dad. My kids look at me sometimes and they go, why couldn't we have, like, I don't know, a rich dad? I'm just kidding. Maybe. Why can't we have the dad that's cooler than you?
Oh,
Well,
but you practiced, and 4 or 5
I,
kids in, you kind of got it
I
down.
practiced. Yeah, I practiced 4 or 5 kids in. I got a little better.
Yeah.
No, I mean, there's things that, you know, beyond the realm of what we can be certain of that we're afraid of, right? We always fear the unknown.
Hmm.
And I don't buy it when people say, "Oh no, I absolutely have zero worries because God's got me." I don't believe them when they say that.
They're lying or they're crazy. One or
Yeah.
the other, right?
Right? Or they're on some really good medications,
Hmm.
like whatever SSRIs you're on. Uh, please drop a link in the comments because I want some of that.
Well, look at me. Look at the challenges that the apostles faced, and yeah, they did what Christ had asked them to do. But you're not going to tell me they weren't frightened. I mean, you look at Peter, who left Rome when he saw Christians being burned at the stake and things like that. He's like, I can't do this.
Oh,
And then
that's my signal. Time to go.
yeah, right. But he had a vision of Christ. He turned around and he went back in, and he winds up getting arrested and crucified. But but you can't tell me that he wasn't frightened. You can't tell me that any of those guys, while they were being led to their deaths, didn't have some trepidation. I'm not saying that they didn't willingly go and they didn't accept what was happening, and they didn't have that thought of, okay, on the other side of this, what I'm about to go through on the other side of this is paradise. But they still knew they had to go through whatever it was that was in front of them. And and
Obviously.
you know what I mean? But so there's going to be some a deep breath and can I do this kind of a moment, not this I'm amazing, this doesn't affect me at all. you know
No, I mean, we're told don't be afraid, but obviously you're still going to be afraid. It's a very human side of you.
Sure.
And that's not what courage is. Courage is not being not afraid. Courage is just doing what you got to do while you're afraid,
Regardless, yeah,
right?
yeah,
You can't be courageous if you're not afraid,
sure.
right? An act of courage is doing something aware of the danger and being afraid of that danger, but choosing to act anyway.
Yeah.
When I think of this weird political sphere that all of America is unfortunately embattled into, every 4 years. And I have to admit, I get hit with some uncertainty, right?
Hmm.
If no matter, and it comes with both candidates, if this candidate wins, this is what it means for me financially. If this candidate wins, this is what it means for me financially or even spiritually sometimes, right? I'm sure that's a real issue I mean, look at people in, Venezuela or in Brazil or places where Christianity is still like a fringe religion,
Hmm.
and you have to, what was it? They in Spain, they were trying to ban crucifixes and not allow you to say the rosary in public. I
Yeah.
mean, it's Spain, right? You would kind of think that almost everyone there was Catholic,
Mm.
but things that happen in our world around us, they affect us in ways that we should probably be concerned about. I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
like and I used to have this attitude, which was if I can't see it from my front porch, then it's not my problem. That's great as long as you've got a huge gap between what's happening and your front porch. But eventually, what's happening keeps getting bigger and closer and bigger and closer until it is at your front porch. And then you've got no other option, but you have to move if you don't want to see it, or the problem's too big for you to deal with. And this can be a literal problem, an actual physical problem, something that is tangible and has manifested itself physically, or it could be something you can't see. It could be something that's financial. It could be something that is economical in some way.
Yeah.
Right. You've been around a lot longer than I have, man.
Yeah, we bring it up often.
Bring that up often. So I'm going to ask you, do you, having lived through such times as
the American Revolution,
the Spanish flu epidemic, the Great Depression,
the Black Plague,
all of the Black Plague. No, like, you've been around, you've seen more presidents than I have come and go. You've seen different economic ups and downs.
Yeah.
As an adult than I have. When you have a wife, kids, a family to support and look after.
Yeah.
How did you manage? Because for me, the reason this is what I'm saying is, for me, I tend to halfway do no matter what, I'll probably be fine. I'll figure out some way to make it all right, because God's not going to give me more than I can handle. It might not look the same as it does now, but I'll get it figured out, by the grace of God and with his help.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other is that side of my brain going, well, what if it doesn't work out? What if I can't? Mm-hmm. What if I'm screwed? And what if this is like the end, of the life that we have now?
Yeah.
How do you and how did you balance that? Because you can't act like it's not going to affect you, especially if you have a wife and you have kids, like a lot of people who listen to this show do.
Yeah.
One way or the other, you're going to be affected by whatever happens around you. It might be big, it might be small.
Yeah. And I would say, and I know there are those who will say that it's 2024 and there are no typical male roles, there are no typical female roles, that nothing separates us. And folks from an older generation, and I guess I qualify.
Those people
now
are mentally ill, so I tend not.
Yeah, but I mean, but there is that standard, and it still exists in. I don't know if it's the majority of Catholic households, but in a decent number of Catholic households where, the man is, and I'm not saying he's the sole provider, because in this day and age, quite often you need two incomes, but typically the male is always going to be working, whereas the mother might sometimes take an extended leave to take care of the children and things like that. And and you look to the father of the household for protection, for your safety, and for shoveling the walk and cutting the grass, and and things like that. So I like to think that a lot of that still exists, and and opening a door for his wife and all that sort of fun stuff. Like I said, there's those who would argue with me and say, no, there's really no difference in what men and women bring to the table. But I don't adhere to that. I think that there still is. And so I think that one of the things that you take on as a man and family is the concern of how are we getting by every day? How is this working out? And I will tell you, in my own experience, there's certainly been times where the economy was down, where I was out of work, and sometimes for a very short period of time, and sometimes for an extended period of time. And I can tell you that, there are many, many, many nights where I made sure everyone was tucked in and sound asleep. And and going to bed with thoughts and dreams that everything is wonderful and tomorrow's going to be another beautiful day. And then I'd go and I'd maybe throw in a load of laundry or do something like that. And I'd be up until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning with concern. How is this going to work out? How are we going to get through this current family crisis that's going on? But that was my job. And that's how I looked at it, it was my job to worry. And then the next day, go back to reassuring everyone that everything's going to be okay. Because, I did always believe that in the long run, yeah, things were going to be okay. But somebody did have to take on that task.
That's generally how it works.
It's generally how it works. Yeah, there's downs and then there's followed by ups, But I thought it was part of my job to take on that worry and that concern so that no one else had to. And then I would be that strong voice, that reassuring voice the next day saying, you know what? We've got a roof over our heads. We've got food in the refrigerator. You've got your Catholic school tuition is paid up and all this other fun stuff. And then just go out and make sure that all was true. But, so I'm not, I would never be, there was never a period of time where I was like, oh, well, be not afraid. And, oh, okay, cool. There's nothing to fear. Obviously, we're not of this world, but we live in it. And there is a lot of crap that this world throws at you that you need to face and look at and be concerned about, and I think it's always been part of my job. Look, my kids are now 30 and 26 and have good jobs and good salaries and really making their way in the world. I worry about them as much as I did the very first day either one of them was born, because that's what you take on. I'll never get to the point where I say, this is fine. God's got this. My kids have got this. Everything's going to be great. Everything's going to be rosy. No, you have those fears, but again, like, and I mention this all the time. It's not about having these fears or these concerns. It's about what are you doing about it? What is your response to those things? And again, I even mentioned it yesterday. Yeah, you can curl up into a ball and turn the lights out and hope that it all goes away. Or you can just get up every day and do what you need to do to make sure that you get through today. And if you're at that age where you've got young kids and things like that, make sure that they get through the day happy and healthy and taken care of and fed and clothed and everything else. So, this world is always going to throw a lot of crap in front of us, but it's our responsibility, fear or not, to take care of those things and take care of those needs of the people that you care about and that you've been given watch over by God, and certainly when God blesses you with children, he says the part of the deal is you make sure these kids are okay. You make sure that their view of the world is a happy one and is a healthy one, and so that's what so how do you get through that stuff? And you just do what you have to do. And I'll say it out loud. You do what you have to do as a man. And if people want to take issue with me saying it that way, that you do what you have to do as a man, I'm fine with that, but I think that there are responsibilities that go along with being a man. There's responsibilities that go along with being a woman,
Oh yeah.
And God bless women for doing what they do. God bless men for doing what they do. There's nothing wrong with being able to look at that the man and the woman in a household and realizing that they are different and they have different responsibilities, and each of them has to step up and meet those responsibilities. I really don't see why we have a problem with saying that in today's world. It is what it is. And sometimes those responsibilities overlap, and sometimes one is struggling, the other one steps up and takes on some of the other responsibilities, and vice versa. I mean, that's life, but there still are those differences that I think it's ridiculous to try to pretend don't exist. But I guess the bottom line with all this, what I'm saying is that, yeah, there are definitely things that we should be concerned about and perhaps even sometimes have fears about in this world. But it's how you respond to those that matters, and it's kind of like what we're being graded on, honestly, And
yeah, that's about how I feel with it. It's I feel like my job as a dad is to always be in that constant state of, is this gonna work out or not?
Yeah.
Right? Because chances are it might not. You never really know.
Yeah.
But it just might.
Yeah. I'm just
So
thinking,
whenever
while we're talking about this,
I'm dealing with it, it's
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say while we're talking about this, I get all these memories, these flashbacks to way back when, and I think about my daughter when she was very young, and she was always a very cautious girl. I would say she's a sweetheart, but I mean, like just that as an example, one time we were driving, I was driving her to school, and it was pouring rain, and we went past a pond, and there were ducks on the pond. And I don't know why this is where her head went, but because it was pouring rain and the ducks were on the pond, she's like, "Daddy, are those ducks going to drown because it's raining so hard?" And I had to reassure her that no, ducks are kind of suited for this. They know what to do in rain, and they'll be okay. They're not going to drown. But that's the kind of person she is. God bless her for it. But that she's always concerned about everyone else and anything else and everything. But every night when I would go into her bedroom and just to say goodnight, kiss her on the forehead, maybe tell her a little story or whatever, she would always run through this checklist. Daddy, did you make sure the doors are locked? Daddy, did you make sure Daddy, did you make sure the windows are closed and locked? Is the outside light on? And this is from a very young age. And I always told her, yes, sweetheart, Daddy did all those things. And then she would be, I'm okay now. I can go to sleep. But again, that's such a small example, but that's what it was. I was her dad. She counted on her dad to make sure that she was going to be safe through the night, and then she could sleep because Daddy's got this. So that's just my point there, is that even in these things that might seem very small to somebody or to someone on the outside, to the people who care about you, these are huge things. These are major things. And you can't shirk that responsibility. You can't ignore those responsibilities. So that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing this husband and dad thing for a while now, right? And that's where I usually find myself falling on it. It's my job to handle the brunt of the stress, of the worry, the providing, just so that they don't have to.
Yeah.
And I get it. Sometimes it makes me feel exhausted. I'm blessed to have the life that I have now where my stresses and worries are very minimal. But that wasn't always the case. And that's not the case for a lot of people out there. Right. And so maybe they're worried about their job. Maybe they're worried about bills. Maybe they're worried about health issues or just peace in the family. Maybe they got some drama or, sick loved ones, whatever. And they might, especially men, because we judge ourselves very severely. And then after we judge ourselves very severely, we brush it under the rug and go, screw it, nothing I can do about it. It is what it is. That's almost by default our constant go-to.
Yeah.
We turn around and we will judge ourselves again later in those quiet moments while we're driving, sitting on the toilet, in the shower, whatever. The spiritual side of things, it's, am I screwing this up because I'm terrified? I'm living paycheck to paycheck, or I can't find this job, or I'm getting laid off and I don't have anything lined up, or I can't get these bills paid. And I'm afraid. But I was told I'm not supposed to be afraid. So is that the reason this is happening to me? Because I'm afraid? And am I screwing it up because I'm afraid? No, bro, you're a man dealing with life as it comes at you. You're not screwing it up. Fear is you're always going to have fear. Me personally, I think, to bring it all the way around full circle, do not be afraid doesn't apply to this earthly life in perspective.
No.
It applies to the end of it all. You don't have to be afraid of how it's all going to turn out in the end. And by the end, I don't just mean when you die. I mean when Christ returns and we get a new heaven and we get a new earth. That's when everything's good. Everything is paradise. That's the do not be afraid part. But I've talked to so many people, they judge themselves because they're afraid. Because I'm afraid of the future. I'm afraid of what the future might hold. I'm afraid for my kids' future. I'm afraid for my wife's health or my health or our financial future. Those are legitimate things to worry about.
Absolutely.
And I see so many guys with that attitude that I talked about with, it's such an arrogant level of confidence that I'm almost jealous of it or annoyed by it. I don't know. It'll be fine. Bro, you were literally eating out of a cardboard box on the side of the street in Detroit. What do you mean it's fine?
Yeah,
like you should, worry about something.
Yeah.
But I see dads, mostly dads, especially those that have a lot of weight on their shoulders. They're providing for their family. They're making sure that their wives and children are provided for, and they maintain a certain level of comfort.
Yeah.
And they worry, and it's okay to worry. You can offer up that stress and that anxiety to Christ and pray about it. But like we talked about yesterday on the show, prayer is not the only thing. If you got a toothache, you can ask for St. Apollonia's intercession, but also go to the dentist. If you're worried about your financial future, pray. That's awesome. But also do something to help secure your financial future. Action is always going to mitigate the fear. Right? But you can't get paralyzed in that fear. And you especially shouldn't judge yourself or be too hard on yourself because you're afraid of something.
Yeah.
Because that's when you get paralyzed and your fears end up getting realized because you paralyzed yourself in that fear.
Yeah.
That's where you have to have the faith that as long as I don't stop, something will get better.
Yeah. Yeah. You talked about, you mentioned just a few minutes ago about some guy said, no, I got this, everything's fine, everything's cool and everything. And you're like, hey, dude, you're living under an underpass in a cardboard box and stuff like that. Yeah, you should be concerned. And it's interesting because actually it reminded me of this story that I had read just a few months or so ago. And it was with Shaquille O'Neal, believe it or not, the basketball player. And actually,
never heard of him.
Never heard of him. And in real life, he seems like he's a really
the fact that you had to qualify that for me. Shaquille O'Neal,
listen,
the basketball player. Oh, that Shaquille O'Neal. Yeah, such a common name.
As opposed
like John Smith.
Yeah, as opposed to
as a core Shaquille O'Neal, the horseshoe maker.
Exactly.
Right.
But anyway, so this one time he tells this story about how he's talking about like fears and anxieties and things like that and pressure of life and he when he talks about this one time I think it was a game against the Knicks and he had a horrible game. He played like crap. Just not good. And he was really down on himself. He was really upset, really just really bummed out. And I guess he had a habit of calling his dad and talking to him after games and things like that. And his dad, well, not saying it to him, but was really disappointed with his attitude towards what was going on in his life at that moment. And he says, listen, you're flying home tonight, blah, blah, blah. Tomorrow morning, you come over to my house. I want you at my house at 5:00 in the morning. And Shaquille always says that like his dad was one of those guys where dad says something, you listen, you do it. You don't talk unless he talks to you, that kind of stuff. So here's this guy. What is he? 7'4", 7'2"? I don't know what he is. He's huge.
He's something.
He's something. He's a basketball player. He's making millions upon millions and millions of dollars. Dad says, be at my house at 5 in the morning. He was at his dad's house at 5 in the morning. Dad comes out, gets in a car, and Dad starts driving. Well, they're driving for a while. And Shaquille O'Neal says something like, Dad, where are we going? And his dad gets so annoyed with him. Did I ask you to speak? You don't say anything, right? So he shuts up. They drive and they get to a really, really nasty part of town. They pull up under this overpass, and it's still dark out. It's like 5:30 or so by now, 5:45. And they park, and they're just sitting there in silence. And Shaquille O'Neal knows, but I don't say anything and I don't ask anything. Finally, a little bit after 6:00, on the other side of the street, under this overpass, there's a little tent there. And a guy steps out of that tent. And he's looking around and he's digging through the stuff on the side of the road and things like that. And his dad says, just wait. And then the mother steps out. And a few minutes later, you see a couple kids come out of the tent and they're kind of running around under the overpass, playing in the garbage and all this stuff. And his dad says to him, that's pressure. This guy not knowing how he's going to get through today, how he's going to feed his children today, how he's going to feed his wife, how he's going to keep them safe, how he's going to keep them from not being stabbed under an underpass here. You're telling me you're under pressure because you had a bad game, because other big guys were pushing you around under the boards? He says, you know what? You're still going to get a big honking check at the end of the week, aren't you? That's not pressure. What this guy is going through is pressure. And, Shaquille learned a really valuable and important lesson that day. And I think we can learn something from that story as well, is that, yeah, we've got these struggles. And it's important to be concerned about what truly is important and what really is difficult. So you're saying about, like, there's some guys that'll just like, yeah, I don't know what we're going to have for dinner tonight. Hopefully I can find some mac and cheese on the side of the road that somebody discarded or whatever. We're living in a cardboard box, but it's okay.
I love it when mac and cheese grows on the side of the road.
Sometimes it does, but what I'm saying is that, it's okay to be fearful. It's okay to be concerned. It's okay to be worried, but it also should be about the right things. You know what I mean? And that's what Shaquille learned that day, is that, yeah, there are times to be fearful. There are times to be worried and to be concerned and be depressed and to be discouraged and things, but make sure it's about things that actually matter and things that you can actually take hold of and do something about, And there are people in the world that are under so much more pressure than you can possibly imagine, and take a lesson from how they face those difficulties and those difficult times. And so, true.
I think it's equally foolish to be constantly afraid and to never be afraid.
Sure. There's a balance.
I think yeah, exactly. Fear is healthy.
Yeah.
Fear is normal. But one, you can't let the fear cripple you.
Yeah.
And paralyze you into not making a decision, into not taking any action. But you also can't be completely absent of fear.
No.
And think there's not going to be any consequences for anything you do because I'll figure it out. I got this.
Yeah. No. Be fearful about the right things and respond appropriately to those fears. Do something about them.
Yeah, exactly. I'm reminded of being homeless, living in a motel. 2 years we were there. Worked at a work today, get paid today, general labor kind of place. You show up early in the morning. They go, hey, we need 2 guys to go sweep at a construction site. Or we need 2 guys to go dig holes for the electric company. Right? That kind of thing. I was making $56 a day. I had to walk to the little job office. I had to catch a ride with somebody else going to the same job ticket that I was going to. Get dropped off, and then I'd get my little hour sheet signed off. Turn it in at the office. The office would give me my check. I'd walk next door to the gas station. I'd cash the check, and then I'd walk back to the hotel. Then I would asked my wife, because we didn't have a phone, or a cell phone for me anyway,
Mhm.
what do we need from the store? She would tell me. I would walk to the store with a backpack on. I would buy whatever would fit in the backpack and that I could carry, and then I would walk back to the hotel room. Doing all of that while trying to keep enough money so that we could pay the hotel bill for another week. That's pressure.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't afford to take a single day off, or we would either have to choose between not having a bed or not having food, unless we got lucky. And I'm lucky, I mean, somebody said, hey, you know what? Let me be kind to this random stranger and pay for your week in the hotel. Nobody ever did that, by the way.
Shocking.
But by the end of it, my wife's sister came back from the Middle East and moved to the area where we were living, because that's where she was from.
Mm.
We moved in with her. And that gave me a break.
Mm.
I remember my body was so broken. My hands, my feet covered in calluses and blisters. Had bruises. I don't even know where they came from. My body was like barely hanging on. The only thing that kept me going through all of that was I literally can't get any lower except for ending up in a shelter.
Mm.
And obviously, we're not all going to be together in a shelter. And there's going to be no one to look after my wife or look after my kids if we end up separated.
Mm.
But when I was finally done with all of that, I think I slept more in those first 2 weeks than I had ever slept in those 2 years. Had all the kids a lot of the kids in one bed, my wife and the other, and some more kids in another bed. And then I slept on the floor in the hotel. And I'll never forget my wife sitting at the edge, pouring witch hazel all over my feet because they were just covered in blisters, and trying to clean them off my feet. I'll never forget. And then she's wrapping me in like this cheap gauze we got from the dollar store. And then I'm putting on these shoes that don't fit that I got from a thrift store because I'd already worked through the others. Fear kept me going. But I didn't let that fear paralyze me to where I just sat there like, I don't know what we're going to do now in that hotel room, because I would have lasted 1 week and we would have been screwed after that.
Yeah.
It was fear that kept me walking to the job every single day early enough to be first in line. Well, at least within the first 5 people in line to be able to get a job ticket that day, because there was nothing more disappointing than, oh, well, we didn't have any jobs come through today.
Yeah. Yeah,
The only days the office wasn't open was on Sunday, and it was Monday through Saturday, $56 a day. And $56 was not take home. $56 is what the check was for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But fear was your motivator.
Fear was the thing that kept me from stopping. Fear of what the hell else could happen if I screw this up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Fear's healthy. It's okay to be afraid.
Absolutely. It's I say it a million times. It's not the fear. It's how you respond to that. Is it going to be a motivator? Is it going to get you to do what you did? Or are you just going to say, screw it? We're so close to the edge. We're about to fall in. I can't hold back the floodwaters anymore. I'm not doing this anymore. And that's it. And then not, so you and your entire family collapse, no, because that is the other possibility with fear, that you just give in, you submit to it, and you didn't do that. And that's what I'm saying, is that to say that you fear nothing is ridiculous. To say that my fear motivates me, then that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Now, I don't suggest fear being your constant motivator because that's a terrible way to live. Like, I'm not
No, but you
afraid
use it to
anymore,
attach.
right?
Yeah.
But in that moment, being afraid of things getting worse was a good enough motivator to keep me
Exactly.
going. And some people have heard that story before. A lot of people have heard that story before. And they go, no. You loved your kids enough to not fail. No, I was afraid. Okay. I was afraid. Of course, I love my wife and I love my kids. But the biggest thing that kept me getting up every single day and working my body until it was breaking, that was fear. Fear kept me going from that.
Absolutely.
And obviously, it wasn't faith that everything would work out. No, we caught a lucky break, is what we did. Right.
Yeah.
But that fear motivated me long enough until a lucky break came along, or in some instances for others, it could be an opportunity presents itself.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
The point is that you're not screwing up this spiritual thing as a Catholic man by being afraid.
No.
Fear's healthy. Faith in Christ, absolutely, for the salvation of your soul.
Yeah.
You need to understand that being afraid of things that can happen in between now and then are things you can be afraid of. You just can't let it paralyze you. And just you need to stop judging yourself so harshly if you're always anxious or always worried.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's just part of what life is. And I know there's going to be some people listen to this and they'll say, you're not supposed to be anxious. Just give it to God. Yeah, well, maybe that anxiety is something God's giving you right now, saying you should be anxious because it needs to motivate you to get off your butt and go do something.
Mm.
Giving my anxiety to God. He gave it right back. Do something with it.
Yeah. Very true.
Well, let's shift gears into something cool now. You got a little bit of time. See what you brought out of your basement. I've depressed everybody enough.
Well, this is a perk, everyone. Now, this is actually, I brought up something kind of cool. Is I don't know if you, I'm sure, I think most people have heard of cabinet cards. Cabinet cards are very thin photographs. You never heard of cabinet cards? They're very thin photographs.
I might have heard of them, but just not under that name. So
okay, but they are, and they're backed on cardboard, and they were developed 1870s or so, and it was great because it was a very cheap way of making photographs available. So people would buy cabinet cards. You could have pictures taken of your family or an event, and it done up in this way. And they were so cheap that, I mean, sometimes they were used as giveaways and things like that. And in fact, it was great because it was also a form of advertising for the photographer. You can see this guy, J.J. McBride, in Buffalo, New York. He had his advertising on the back there. And they called them cabinet cards because this one is a little smaller, but typically they were about 4.5 to 5 inches by about 7 inches. So if you put them in your china cabinet, you could see them from across the room. And if you had, especially if it was pictures of family members and things. So they were cabinet cards. But anyway, but this one is really cool because this is a cabinet card photo of Bernard McQuaid, who was the very first bishop of the Diocese of Rochester in New York. And so this card is from probably right around 1900, because the other interesting thing about cabinet cards is they were hugely popular from about 1880 into the very early 1900s until the Brownie camera was invented. And then everyone could take photographs of their own family members and special events and things like that, and have the film developed and have their own pictures. So the cabinet card went by the wayside. So it had its heyday for about 20 to 30 years. But anyway, but this particular bishop, he's a really cool dude. He still, even to this day, he was the longest, not only the first bishop of Rochester, but the longest serving. He served for about 40 years. And interesting early life because his mom died when he was only 3 years old, and then just a couple of years later his father was killed by a co-worker at a glass factory. So he wound up going to an orphanage and being raised by the Sisters of Charity. But it's just a pretty cool life he led. He wound up becoming a priest, obviously. That's how you become a bishop. And he he was the very first president of Seton Hall University. Now, if you're from New Jersey, you're very familiar with Seton Hall University. And he was there for, I guess, about 5 or 10 years. He was the president there. And then right after that, he became the bishop in Rochester, New York. He was huge proponent of Catholic education. In fact, at one point, he had made it a rule where, now we talked today about like politicians being not given communion because of their stance on abortion and things like that. This guy wanted so much for people to send their kids to Catholic schools that he made a decree in his diocese that parents not sending their kids to Catholic school was enough reason to withhold communion from them. That only lasted a couple of years. People got very upset about that.
I mean, it's blasphemous.
It really is, right? So, but this cool guy,
that is not good enough reason. So,
but he when he started as the bishop there were 54,000 Catholics, 39 priests, and 35 parishes there. And by the time he was done, there were 121,000 Catholics, 164 priests, and 93 parishes. So 3 times the amount of parishes. But it's kind of good that he was big into education, because he did found a whole bunch of schools, elementary schools and high schools, Catholic ones. He founded a seminary which still exists today. He attended Vatican Council I, and he was a very vocal dude there. Caused a lot of issues, but that is our man, Bishop Bernard John McQuaid. And this is I guess so this card would probably be in a neighborhood of about 110 to 115 years old. And good old Bishop McQuaid. And so you learned about a bishop, and you learned about cabinet cards.
So yeah, I learned about a bishop who held the sacrament hostage.
He really did. Hey, listen, he got approval.
I can't endorse that. I mean,
no, I know. I know. He got approval from the Holy See. He got approval from the Vatican to do that. And like I said, it didn't last very long. But but he's like, you will send your kids. Well, okay. There was a stipulation though. If there was a Catholic school within your neighborhood, he expected you to send your kids there. You didn't have to, send them 3 states over or anything like that. Now, again, I know it's still pretty harsh and stuff like that, but at least he realized that you can't tell people that they have to send their kids, an hour away or 2 hours away or whatever, just to attend a Catholic school. But and also to his, I don't want to say as far as being in defense of him, but if you could not afford to send your kids, he worked all sorts of things out so that you would be able to send them through, scholarship money and things like that. And which is very interesting. And you think about the late 1800s, early 1900s, that he would do those sort of things, that he would work out, a special budget for you or a scholarship money or something like that. I mean, I didn't even know that kind of stuff existed then, but this guy made it happen. But yeah, he led quite an interesting life. Apparently, he got into a lot of scuffles with a lot of his priests as well in the diocese.
Oh, I can imagine. He seems like that kind of guy.
He was that kind of guy. But there he is. Good old Bishop McQuaid.
Lone Wolf McQuaid over here. Young people have no idea who the hell that is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think it was a good show, man. I don't know. What do you think?
I think they're all incredible. They are all must hear.
Well, you're very biased, so
a little bit.
We'll take that with a grain of salt. Right. Yeah. You are the key grip, not just any, but the.
And I am the key grip.
The key grip. But all right, I suppose we should wrap this up. We got about 25 seconds before I'll have to upgrade in order to stream it. So let's just go ahead and say goodbye, and we'll see you all tomorrow.
We'll do that. God bless everybody.